Continuing the flow of the past, season 2, episode 146. Back with another show. I'm your host, BT. I do want to thank you all for tuning in. Forgot almost that the show was going to be recorded a little earlier than normal. But as life happens, you sometimes are forced to just improv and go with the punches. And that's okay. I will admit that if you've hung around this long, and I say this every week, it is appreciated. It never goes unnoticed. As we mentioned, each show is recorded using the Blue Yeti microphone, and these shows are uploaded weekly to Spreaker.com. Haven't forgotten about the intro and the outro. Just need to work on it, and that's where we're at. Quite a bit of thoughts and stories and information to share. So I'm going to go ahead and get into it. We have, like I said, I have all each week. I make sure I give you the listing and the rundown since I am finally getting the quote unquote format in place regarding what has happened or what is happening around the world of sports and technology. And also in hindsight, I like to kind of give that personal understanding of what's been going on with me as a whole. And I can say right now I'm pretty sore. I've been, quote unquote, getting back to the gym grind, which is not new, but a little bit of a refresher course. So if I'm kind of grimacing or it's a little bit of a delay, y'all just bear with it. Y'all know how I do. The story, so to get started, and I'm going to start, initially I put this story in the middle of the show, but this will be our introduction to each show. And I'm going to make sure that I keep this as the intro for each show. If you are in need of if you are in a crisis and you need any help or any assistance, I have the page saved on my computer, but I also have it you'll see the link in the article each week. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available. You can go to 1-800, or you can call 1-800-799-SAFE or 1-800-799-7233, or you can go to www.thehotline.org. As I promised last week, I wanted to make sure I gave my listeners a resource, a very useful tip in regards to making emergency phone calls. And this is I have this solely for any Apple or iPhone users and any Samsung Android users. If you have an iPhone, how it's going to work, and there are two different ways that it will work. On the iPhone X, iPhone 8, or iPhone 8 Plus, if you have that device, all you do is press and hold the side button or the power button and one of the volume buttons up or down until you see emergency SOS. Then you're going to drag the SOS slider to call the emergency services. Once you continue to hold it down, hold that volume button, a countdown begins and an alert sounds. So by having the alert sounding, that's a way of kind of letting someone know that you're in danger or under duress. Regarding if you have the iPhone 7 or earlier, rapidly press the power button or the other side button 5 times. So if you just hit the power button 5 times by picking up the device, the emergency SOS slider will appear, and then you'll just drag the emergency SOS slider to call the emergency services. Once that call has been completed, then your phone is going to automatically send your emergency contact a text message with your location, and that's of course unless you choose to cancel that option. Be sure when doing this, and this is a helpful tip because I know a lot of people don't use it, but have your location on just for that moment, and then if you need to turn it off afterward, do what you need to do. It's also on, now I have 2 pages. I have the page from Apple support page, and then I have like another company a third party who gave a recommendation. And it explains the similar scenario that I just gave you. It didn't have the iPhone 8 included. But with the Samsung Galaxy, if you have a Samsung Galaxy smartphone, it does have the SOS messages feature built in. It won't be set up by default. So once you set it up, you can send an emergency to 4 pre-selected contacts. When triggered, an emergency message with your location, a picture of your situation, and an audio message will be sent automatically. To set this up, you'll go to your phone settings, go to personal, and then privacy. You're going to select privacy and emergency, and then you'll click on send SOS message. Make sure you enable this feature by clicking the toggle at the top right, which will then prompt you to agree to a disclaimer. If you are one of those people who need to be sure what it entails, read over the terms and conditions if it's something you may or may not be comfortable with doing. After reading it or just going through it, you'll then go ahead and once you accept those terms, you'll be able to set up SOS messages. Then you're going to click send messages to and select your 4 emergency contacts. Finally, when it sends your location, you can choose to enable 2 additional SOS messaging features, which is attaching pictures, which will allow you to take photos, from both your front and rear cameras before the emergency alert is sent. And then you can attach an audio recording, which will allow a 5-second audio recording. And this also works with the Samsung Gear watch that have SOS message, that feature available. If you have any other, and this is also helpful too, there are a couple of apps if you do not have a Samsung Android phone. There are apps for the Android phones themselves, which are Shake to Alert, Emergency, and that's EMERGENSEE, SOS Emergency app, SOS Stay Safe, the emergency button of SOS, and Shake to Safety. All of those are listed on the page that I have shared, and I will make it my goal to keep these in the loop each week on the podcast. Now, I will mention the crisis hotline. I won't go over the emergency SOS info each week. So I just want to make sure that if anybody does need that, you can definitely reach out to me, passpodcastbt@gmail.com, and I can guide you in the right direction in regards to that. So since we've gotten the more subtle stories out of the way, this is a big story, and I didn't know the extent of how intense this story had gotten, but now, as with any news article or with any situation that's going on in the media, as the term goes, it gained legs, and that is related to Larry Nassar. So a lot of you may have questions and wondering who in the world is Larry Nassar. He was a gymnastics doctor with Michigan State, if I recall correctly. So I'm going to read the article first to you all, and it'll kind of answer the question and also go over a couple of things that occurred regarding this incident. Former gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar, accused of sexually abusing more than 140 girls and women, picked a fight with the judge overseeing his marathon sentence hearing. He lost. In a 6-page, single-spaced letter, Nassar complained it was too hard for him to listen to dozens of accusers describe how he abused them under the guise of medical treatments and how it wrecked their lives. He said the judge had turned the proceeding into a media circus and put herself in the spotlight. Now this is entertaining to me, County Court Judge Rosary Aquilina said as she read from the letter in court on Tuesday. Aquilina said if I pass out, she'll have EMTs revive me and prop me up in the witness box. The judge scoffed. I suspect you have watched too much television, Aquilina said. It's delusional. It's delusional. You need to talk about these issues with the therapist and that's not me. Nassar's attorney declined comment. Nassar, 54, the former team doctor for USA Gymnastics, has pleaded guilty in Ingham County to molesting 7 girls. His plea agreement allows for all of his accusers to give impact statements, and more than 100 have signed up to appear in the courtroom or, like Olympic gold medalist Michaela Maroney, have their statements read aloud. Dr. Nassar was not a doctor, Maroney's statement read by a prosecutor said. He in fact was, and forever shall be a child molester and a monster of a human being. The teenagers and women who came in person stood at a podium, often sobbing as they spoke directly to the defendant. Nassar, wearing blue jail clothing and a hangdog expression, mostly kept his head and eyes down and sometimes shook or wept. After each statement, Aquilina consoled and applauded the accuser, heaping scorn on Nassar in the process. And if I'm saying Nasir, sorry about that, y'all. It's Nassar. She's already said she will impose a sentence that ensures he dies in jail. The next judge he faces will be God, she told one woman on Wednesday. On Thursday, Nassar quietly, as Aquilina read out parts of his letter to the court, starting with his complaint about the media coverage. I didn't ask any media to be here, she said. Then she turned to an excerpt where Nassar seemed to be upset that more women than the 7 in his plea deal were being given their day in court. Aquilina is allowing them all to talk, he wrote. She wants me to sit in the witness box next to her for all 4 days so the media cameras will be directed at her. The judge sounded incredulous as she read the words aloud, saying she didn't need the FaceTime. The time face. You know what? I don't have a dog in this fight, sir, she said, adding, I didn't want even one victim to lose their voice. Spending 4 or 5 days listening to them is significantly minor, considering the hours of pleasure you had at their expense and ruining their lives, she said. Nassar said in a letter that he passed out twice before his federal sentencing on child pornography charges, which got him 60 years in prison. I'm sorry about that, sir. I wish you well, Aquilina said. She said she was seated in the witness box, not for my entertainment, quite honestly, but so that your victims can face you in the eye without turning back constantly. And citing his previous fainting episode, she added, I could not have you with a heart condition standing for 4 days. That would be cruel and unusual punishment. Aquilina said she had cut Wednesday's court session short to allow Nassar to meet with mental health services. She asked if they had recommended any recommendations for him, and he said meekly they had not. Nassar will be sentenced at the conclusion of the hearing, which could go into next week. 5 more women have just requested time to speak, bringing the total to 105, prosecutors said. He still faces a sentencing in Eaton County Court where he pleaded guilty to molesting 3 more girls. I'm going to be very direct in what I'm going to say with this. This is one of those moments where you really have to accept what you've done to not be taken lightly. And I feel like Nassar did that within the midst of what he was trying to write in his letter. I'm not making any light on the situation that has occurred with this. To be fair, and this is probably just me being a podcaster and just by nature, a lot of the stories that go on with some of these instances and situations, I don't really watch. Well, now that I'm working a different work schedule, I don't watch a lot of TV shows or sports shows that talk about these topics solely because I want to give my personal eye and my personal thought to where I stand or how I look at the story. Having said that, I think he needs to really be accountable for what he's done. And I feel like in most of what he's stating, there's a huge lack of accountability, and there's more of a victim along with a person crying for attention. I won't say crying for help, because if he really and truly needed help, he would have been trying to get that long before all of this occurred. And obviously that wasn't the case. And I know in hindsight, they don't have it in this story, but in hindsight, I believe the athletic director from Michigan State, either he resigned or he was let go, something along that line. So it definitely was a trickle downward spiral effect behind this happening. I really feel as though Aquilina, the judge, was going to throw the book at him. because of the massive amount of people, massive amount of women involved. And it's not, and I'm saying women, but also just to add to it, people, because when a person goes through, when a woman goes through something of this sort, they can carry this into a relationship with someone else, and the person who that woman is dating or that female is dating may not have a clue what triggered it or what caused it. But then having a story like this come to light does nothing but say, hey, here it is, just in case you were wondering. The trial of the case is still going on this week. More than likely next week I'll have an answer on what the verdict is. I'm not going to really give massive attention. And it's not that I'm not saying I don't want to give massive attention to it. That's mainly the gist of the big story as to what happened with this situation. Because when it first came, full circle, it was addressed and it was like, okay, we're talking about it. Here it is. Boom. Done. Now we've gotten more information. More people have come out. And it's tough because when stories like this occur, the hardest part of it is getting people to come out and admit that something happened, because you don't want to be that first, or you don't want to be the one to say, well, I was hurt or I was harmed by it too, because all of these people are impacted, and because of them having to go through what they went through, there has to be some type of a justice behind it. And that's what the judge is being put in the position of doing, especially with giving each person the opportunity to speak their piece. Him being upset with having to listen to it, you're gonna have to eat that, like literally. And I know I say that numerous times, but he just needs to accept it for what it is and keep it moving. And like I said, I could see by next week's podcast having a story or breakdown in regards to this. And I feel bad because I don't have a tab for this. So we're gonna shift gears because it's brief. Normally I will have this as a tab, but I don't, because I really didn't. It happened and I just kind of was like, oh yeah, I do need to address it. So as many of you know, and by changing the shows on Tuesdays, this gives me a bit of an advantage. We have our Super Bowl teams. There was a article or a story that promoted, hey, if you want to check out the Super Bowl, these are the teams. Like, they kind of had a projection of who they thought the teams would be for the Super Bowl. They halfway got it right. It completely could have been wrong. But we'll just say we'll put it in real direct terms. New England does whatever it takes to win. Point blank. And I know everyone is kind of off or away from the tangent of whether Tom Brady is considered the greatest quarterback of all time or one of the greatest. A lot of people put him in top 3. There's discussion back and forth about this conversation. So if you missed the game, I'll give you a kind of a cliff note story of what happened. First half, Jacksonville went on a good run. They were up 14-0. Ending the first half, nearing the end of the first half, Jacksonville had a good lead. New England made a stride, got within 4. Got within 4, 14-10. Scored a field goal. Next drive or a couple drives later, they had a play where it was pass interference. Didn't really look like pass interference, but of course it's the Patriots playing. Drove the ball down the field, set up for a touchdown. We're gonna fast forward to my part why I'm really gonna talk about this game. Jacksonville had chances to score not just a field goal, but score a touchdown. Blake Bortles checked out in the fourth quarter. Playing against the Patriots, and the Eagles are going to learn this, and I'll get into the Eagles game in a second. Playing against the Patriots, you cannot play an 85 or 90% game. You have to be full downloadable content. You have to be on your A game. You have to pinpoint your passes, everything. One stat that's brought up and addressed during this game is the penalties. The Patriots only had one penalty for the entire game. First and foremost, the game was in New England. Enough said. Second of all, they set a record in they tied their own record of having the least penalties in a game. And that was in 2004, I believe, when that happened. There's a lot that could be said. I mean, as far as like whether the referees were holding the whistle, things of that sort, but it's football. So we're gonna, like I said, we're in the fourth quarter. Jacksonville's trying to get some scores, make attempts to score, couldn't really get the ball in the end zone, like talking about it. New England drives down the field, driving down the field, getting close. They get within the red zone. Brady does a quarterback sneak, gets them closer. I believe it was like might have been first and goal. I'm kind of paraphrasing a bit of the story. They set up for it was either first down or second down. Brady was in the pocket for at least 20 seconds, at least 10 or 15 seconds. Because I'm almost ready to make it like 20 seconds, but it wasn't that long. He was in the pocket for a long period of time. No one got to him. He lobbed a simple pass in the back of the end zone. The wide receiver got both feet in. It was a touchdown. Earlier in the game, and this was a key play too, Gronk got called. I'm sorry, not Gronk. A defender from Jacksonville was called for a helmet-to-helmet hit, which added 15 yards. Gronk was out with a head injury. Gronk, they tried to, they attempted, quote-unquote, the concussion protocol, but luckily they could tell and put pieces together and realizing, like, bro, you're not 100%. Go on, just sit it out. Because what they're going to do is have him, he'll fix up, check things. And, I mean, they have 2 weeks until the Super Bowl. So he'll more than likely be playing the Super Bowl. In the end, the better team won. And my roommate and I had this discussion, and I'm having this discussion on podcast with you all. You can say whatever you want. You can have your hate, your angst, your friction about Tom Brady as a player or as a quarterback, but he can play. He flat out can play. And I mean, granted, he was a 6th-round pick that they really didn't know what they were going to do with him when he first got to New England. But once Drew Bledsoe had his off game and they put Brady in, it's been success, and it's been the Tom Brady story ever since. Now, I'm giving that story major attention strictly because Jacksonville. They normally ask this on sports shows, and it's a tough question, but it's always an honest question. Did Jacksonville lose or did New England win? And this is one of the few times I could say both happened. Jacksonville lost the game solely on penalties and not finishing the game. New England won the game because they didn't get called for halfway anything, and they played a mere perfect game. Nothing else has to be said. The NFC game, however, was totally different. And this will kind of tie into a point that I'm going to address. General, simple football 101. As a team, Minnesota did one thing that teams do wrong all the time. They got too cocky and they got too ahead of themselves. First play of the game, or first drive of the game, Minnesota drives down the field. Minnesota got a touchdown. Didn't see the touchdown. I personally didn't catch it because I was doing some stuff. But in the process of them scoring, after they scored the touchdown, they went and celebrated. Of all the celebrating they did, they decided to do curling. Don't ask, just happened. They didn't score again in that game. The score was 38-7. Philadelphia came to play. Nick Foles came to play. Nick Foles is going to be expected to play as close to, if not possible, 100% in the Super Bowl. And there's no other way to put it. Their team has to play on all cylinders. They're going to literally have to make sure that they put Putting pressure on Brady is going to be what makes or breaks the Super Bowl. I'm going to go ahead and warn you now. Next week there will be more Super Bowl conversation because we'll be edging closer towards that point. But right now, it's going to be intense. But everyone's asked are trying to figure out like who's the favorite, who are you going for. I personally am going for Philly. I'm not thinking or denying the fact that Brady has a good chance to win, but I'm going for Philly. A lot of fans who are, and I love social media. I love the conversation. All of the Dallas fans, for whatever reason, want New England to win, which is very ironic because they don't want Philly to win because they're in the division. And it's crazy because what makes it even more funny is they will have won a Super Bowl more recent than the last time anyone in that division won. I'm sorry. The Giants were the last team in the division that won a Super Bowl recently. So then have the Eagles be the next team that would make it even more of a unique circumstance, especially with Dallas having not won a Super Bowl in almost 20 years. No shade thrown, just making general conversation. Running into the basketball world, and I've kept up with this story a little bit. I read some articles because there was one article that I really wanted to get some clarification on what happened, and I did finally it's kind of like it was quietly being addressed, but now it's all starting to come full circle. So I'm going to give you the timeline that I'm going to talk about the story. Billy Preston was playing, I forgot what school it was. It was his junior year of high school. Had a good resume. He looked talented, ready to play. He was playing with Trayvon Duval, oddly enough, who's at Duke. He played with Terrence Ferguson, who's bouncing back and forth between the G League and the NBA. Nobody's really said anything or seen it, but I've been noticing because you don't hear his name talked about much with Oklahoma. And you had Billy Preston. So that was his junior year. Fast forward to his senior year. Senior year, he decides to go to Oak Hill. Oak Hill is increasing his recruiting. Great, cool. I have no conflict or no problem with that. No one should have a problem with that. He decides to, schools are looking at him, seeing where he wants to go. He decides to go to Kansas. He's at Kansas. He plays. He goes through the process. He played like a couple preseason games. Then he was in a car accident of some sort. And there was a question and concern of whether he would be playing a game for Kansas. Well, story broke on, that would be Thursday, on the 20th. I don't want to assume the date. But last week, he decided that he's going to sign with the European team, BC Igokia. So they've been questioning and having certain uncertainty about his eligibility for a couple of months, but he signed with the team that's located in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He released a statement stating that he's fully, they fully cooperated with the NCAA and were prepared to continue, but it's been 67 days and there's still no end. Because he was kind of almost in the sense of put in the place of not being eligible to play due to they were based on academic ineligibility. He then went on to state, playing at the University of Kansas was a dream of mine, but being a professional has always been my long-term goal, and that day is finally here. He then thanked the Kansas coaches, the fans, and the staff. He hadn't played a singular regular season game for Kansas this year because they were trying to investigate the financial picture of the car he had drove when he had the car crash in early November. His mom then noted, it's been too long. Her name's Nicole Player. They didn't have an answer and weren't prepared to give us answers. He just wants to play. He was a 5-star prospect in the class of 2017. He was expected to make a huge impact on the front court for Kansas, who had lacked depth without him. They were kind of put in a position where where power forward Silvio De Souza had enrolled after graduating high school in December. the school or the pro team Agokea announced the signing, as did the Adriatic Basketball Association, along with Kansas coach Bill Self. Self went on to state that they can confirm that Billy Preston is foregoing his eligibility to play at Kansas and is signed with a professional team. His family has been very upfront, telling us that his first choice was to stay at Kansas, but with the uncertainty of the situation, they needed to look at other potential options. The opportunity in Bosnia came with a deadline for a decision, and the family reached that decision Friday afternoon. He did not sign with an agent, and the team then responded in stating that they are glad that he's joining their team. He will, between him going into this team, it's a likelihood that he'll be going into the draft next year. The general manager for BC Agokea, Igor Dodik, told ESPN's Jonathan Givoni that he was signed until the end of the season, but they have a private agreement in the contract that if he gets drafted in June, he'll pay them a certain amount of money for the efforts in him getting picked. First of all, we want to give young players opportunity to rise and step forward. Our goal is to make our club recognizable in Europe and USA. We want to show ourselves this summer at the NBA draft. Bringing Preston is also good marketing for the club. Those are the main reasons we got him, not money. And this was stated by Dodik. They make their debut. They play on January the 29th. And he is going to play in both the Adriatic League and against lower level competition in the Bosnian League. So it'll be kind of a similar situation that the Ball brothers are in now. And they give a little bit of information about Dodik. And finally, Jeffrey Val, who is Billy Preston's lawyer, said he wasn't aware of any allegations against the club and that he would reserve comment until it could conduct more research. So to give kind of a backstory of that, Igor Dodik is the son of Milorad Dodik, who's the president of Republika Srpska, an autonomous region of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and according to numerous reports, the main sponsor of Agokea. In January, the U.S. Treasury Department issued sanctions against Milorad Dodik for actively obstructing the Dayton Accords, which were the framework of a peace agreement in Bosnia and Herzegovina. According to the Treasury Department, any property or interest in property of Dodik within U.S. jurisdiction is blocked, and U.S. persons are generally prohibited in engaging in transactions with him. So we'll see how that can play into what might happen with him being there as well. In hindsight, Preston's just going over there just to get some time to play and also to get an opportunity to make himself exposed towards scouts, because now scouts are going to have to come see him or get YouTube videos or Facebook live stories about what happened. I don't know how to feel about it, only because Billy Preston's a good player, but I don't know if Billy Preston's going to be a good player as lottery pick. He'll probably get a lottery draft in the NBA draft, but it's going to come down to that need and necessity of him going to a team. And that's just how I'm looking at it right now. So I have this story. I won't really give a huge amount of attention to it, but I'm going to address it. The Washington Wizards played against the Charlotte Hornets in Charlotte. This continues into a trend that I talked about last week, and I'm going to continue it again this week. There was a scuffle. The game ended where the Hornets scored 133 points. There was one brief point in the game where the Wizards showed fight. The final score was 133-109, Hornets winning. The only time the Wizards seemingly showed any fight in this game came in the fourth quarter when reserve guard Tim Frazier nearly came to blows with Hornets backup Michael Carter-Williams. Frazier was also so infuriated he had to be held back by officials and his own coaches. The 6'1" guard was ejected after just 3 minutes on the court. I'm gonna go into this a little bit because the scuffle itself happened so quick that it was unexpected. Frazier wasn't even part of the play, mind you. Kelly Oubre was going to the basket, and I have the link in the show notes, so if you want to go and look at the highlight, it'll kind of explain to a T what happened. Kelly Oubre was going to the basket. As he was going to the basket, Michael Carter-Williams and another player with Washington, I think it's Jason Smith, they were kind of clamped together. Jason Smith somehow pulled Carter-Williams down. So when he pulled him down, Michael Carter-Williams got frustrated, jumped up, was ready to fight. But there was really no fight. And that's why if you ever hear me use this term with sports, it's always going to be a scuffle because no one really fights in sports anymore. So as Michael Carter-Williams gets up, he's ready to fight. Tim Frazier comes from the three-point line running in ready to fight. And everyone's trying to hold him back because it was, team unity, things of that sort. But it was just the timing that didn't make sense. You're already, at this point of the game, the score was 123-99 with 4 minutes left. Wasn't that serious. It really wasn't that serious. That's the nicest way I can put it. So I share that story, and then I go into another quote-unquote scuffle, which I thought this scuffle was funnier only because it wasn't even a scuffle. It was like a headlock. So the Orlando Magic, and I know this, first and foremost, I'm not sitting here like doing space fillers like, okay, I'm going to just throw stories in to talk about folks who quote-unquote got in fights but really didn't fight. These are situations and instances that happen during games, so I wanted to make sure I don't leave anything out of the mix. And obviously with this one, it's no exception. Aaron Aflalo, he's kind of like a secret underground veteran in the NBA now. He was put in a headlock when he tried to take a wild... He took a wild swing at Timberwolves Nemanja Bjelica. Today is Let's Try to Pronounce Weird Names Day. That's okay. We're gonna roll with it. Second quarter of the Magic Timberwolves game was on last Tuesday. Nemanja Bjelica was going for a rebound. Aaron Aflalo took a huge swing at his head, but he missed. So afterward, Bjelica, just being cordial about it, said, "I'm just gonna put him in a headlock." But he did it very he did it very relaxing. Like, he put him in the headlock, but he was also trying to hold his hands up. And it's like, you can't do both. You got two hands. You can't, like, it's not gonna look obvious. It was like he had one hand in, like, he had his left arm holding his head and his other arm just holding him up like, look, I ain't do nothing. And it's like, but you're holding him. Like, no one doesn't notice it. He eventually let him go as players from both teams rushed over to get the two away from each other. They were obviously thrown out for this incident. Now, one thing that's said that's not addressed, and you'll see this in the videos for this article, is they were going for a rebound, but they were at the free throw line. So it was already a little bit of pushing and shoving anyway. And the broadcasters who were looking at it stated that the two had already been going at it. It was just a matter of if or when. Aaron Aflalo and this was written by Orlando Sentinel's Josh Robbins. Aaron Aflalo and Nemanja Bjelica got into a dust-up just now, and Aflalo threw a right-hand punch to Bjelica's face. A few minutes earlier, the two players received a double technical foul. So it was kind of that momentum build-up, like we were getting to that point. It was just a matter of when. And tensions seem to be, and as you know, they talk about this, and this is why I'm sharing. I'm glad this article kind of ties into it because it goes right into it. Tensions seem to be running high in the NBA as of late. Kyle Lowry told reporters he was waiting to meet Ben Simmons in the hallway after the Raptors 76ers game on Monday night. Plus, the Rockets tried to go through a back door to confront the Clippers in their locker room after their game on Monday night. And what's brought up, ironically, is the All-Star game is a few weeks away. So the energy that they're putting into all of this now can be saved for just, let's all just calm down and just take a breather. And I feel like that would just ease things a lot better in hindsight. I will say this. There's very slim to no chance that some players in the NBA really are going to fight. If there was really to be, and someone has talked about this before, and I believe Joe Budden has joked about it on his podcast. If it was any two players in the NBA right now that I could see square up and fight and wouldn't even give it a thought, it would be Boogie. It would be DeMarcus Cousins and Zach Randolph, easily. Wouldn't even think about it. And the ironic part is they could have played on the same team together at some random point, but that, we obviously know that's not going to happen. So our last, and before I say last, but this is our final sports story we have for right now, because I have a great the asses of the week this week. Y'all did a great job. That's all I'm gonna say. But the starting lineups for the NBA All-Star Game were announced. By default, the captains are going to be Steph Curry and LeBron James. Sorry, I'm tweaking some stuff. Steph Curry and LeBron James are going to be your respective your respective captains for the NBA All-Star Game. The players who are going to be participating are Giannis Antetokounmpo. I don't know why I always have a tough time with his name. Joel Embiid, Kyrie Irving, and DeMar DeRozan were chosen as starters from the Eastern Conference. James Harden, Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, and DeMarcus Cousins were chosen as starters for the Western Conference. As we all know, starters were determined by a vote from fans, players, and a select group of media. That was announced by the NBA on Thursday, and the game will be played February the 18th in LA. Steph did post a tweet stating that he was very appreciative of being a captain. So with the new format, James and Curry will choose their teams without regard for conference affiliation from the pool of starters and reserves. The reserves will be announced on Thursday of this week, on the 25th. Reserves will be selected by the NBA and head coaches. By the NBA head coaches and announced Tuesday, which is today. And the full team rosters will be announced on the 25th, which means they're going to announce who the reserves are today. Then they're going to do the rundown of the who's picking who. The only thing that I think a lot of people have asked for and requested in regards to this, and if you read the article, it goes into more detail about how they feel about it and everything of that sort. What I feel a lot of people are in unison about this year is they feel as though if you're going to do the draft or do the selecting of players, it wouldn't have hurt to do it publicly. But I guess because it's the first year and if with anything it's a trial run, you want to see how it's going to work or if it's going to be a beneficial thing to do. So it's going to be fun to look forward to. I have my questions and concerns of whether Steph, first and foremost, how likely is Steph to pick Durant if LeBron doesn't get him first? And also, will Kyrie and LeBron play together? And then I'm also looking at the factor of Westbrook, because Westbrook's not starting this year. So Westbrook being picked up, if he's going to be picked up and him and Durant are going to be on the same team, how that's all going to work out. Side story away from this, and I didn't put a tab for it. I initially wanted to share music with you all because I have nothing else to do. I initially wanted to put a tab for this. I was in between about having to be ass of the week, but I don't feel like it is because there really isn't. It's a story, but it's not a story. You go back to 2014, Joel Embiid was drafted by the Philadelphia 76ers. He didn't play. He made an attempt to go out on a date with Rihanna. Rihanna then responded, come back when you're an all-star, when you're a starter in the NBA. When you're an all-star starter in the NBA. Bruh, something like that. Fast forward, the announcement. Thursday was an ironic day of announcements because they announced the starters for the All-Star game. And Philadelphia played on TV. And Philadelphia won. And they played against Boston, which that says a lot. So after the game, they talked to Joel Embiid. They bring up the conversation about that tweet. Joel Embiid decides, I'm moving on, I'm good, not what I'm after. Do you have any? And he was like, they're kind of egging it on a little bit, saying, is there anything that you want to say to anyone out there? And he politely says, trust the process. So it was kind of like a silent but cordial way of saying, Rihanna, I'm good. I don't want to look at you in that regard. But in the hindsight of it, even with her being with someone, it would have been fun to see him like make a presentation of, so I got the All-Star bid and I'm a starter, what's good. But you can tell Joel had a humbled media moment because any other time he's ready to come at the media and make jokes and make comments without blinking. So I can dig this. I can go along with it. I'm feeling it. It's new. It's something different. I have no problem with it. Not like it really makes a difference because I'm just a podcast in this big world of the media. But those are currently all of the stories I have related to the main meat of sports right now. Like I said earlier, the ass of the week stories are going to be huge. There are some things that I just don't understand people doing, and I'll just leave it at that. So we're into the stuff. And the stuff, there's a lot of stuff that has happened, but the key stuff that is going on right now that has a lot of people kind of on pins and needles, and I'm going to be the one surprising you all to talk about it because normally I'm giving you tech talk, giving you gaming information. This will be kind of a side topic because I may have talked about this last week, but I'll talk about it now. There's a possibility I may be converting. I was a big Xbox guy. Anyone who knows me knows I was devoted and diehard Xbox all day. Couldn't tell me nothing. Now, mind you, it was only with the 360 and the Xbox One. Of course, I have the modded Xbox, but whatever. And I know I'm putting that public, but that's just being honest. But I now have my Xbox One kind of had a moment. And I'm kind of like, you know what? We've had our show. I appreciate the time. Ready to go PlayStation. So PlayStation 4 will be purchased just in limbo, whether it's going to be PS4 Pro or just the regular PlayStation 4. Might get the slim, likely be the slim edition. So today is going to be chill, but I'm going to give you some knowledge and I'm going to read. This is normally I don't do full art like a lot of. Well, let me rephrase it. In the past with episodes, like last week's episode, what I did as far as going into what was going on, I kind of read every article and just went over everything. This article, I'm gonna read it start to finish because as you heard with some of the previous articles, reading everything doesn't need to be. Some of it's gonna kind of explain and tell its own story. This one I want to get everyone kind of on board because a lot of people have not been aware of this. You know, if you work for the government, obviously you know about it. But in hindsight, the government shutdown is occurring, and there is questions and concerns and thoughts of whether the length of time that this could happen. So CNN has an article. If you want to, you're welcome to read it. I'm gonna go ahead and be simple and read it for you. I'm gonna try to go through it, but not rush because I have a tendency to kind of read a little faster than normal. The conventional wisdom, even as senators flailed and failed to find a deal to keep the government open late Friday night and Saturday, was that this would all be over soon. The disagreements were real between the two parties, but the desire to look competent in the eyes of the public would bring warring lawmakers to the table. If the Senate only had a few more hours after the midnight Friday shutdown, they would have made a deal. And they still might. After all, the relative plan, politically and in real world terms, of a government shutdown doesn't truly kick in until Monday when everyone goes back to work, which makes Sunday a critical day for all sides involved in the shutdown. The next scheduled vote in the Senate, and then they give kind of a parentheses on when the next vote would be a current 4-week continuing resolution, which would be on Monday at 1 a.m., which was yesterday. Despite all the assertions that a deal is in the offering, there isn't a deal yet. And the 3-week continuing resolution that Senator Lindsey Graham proposed late Friday night, which was seen by the Republicans as a vehicle to end the shutdown, appears, at least as of this writing, to be dead in the water. The case can be made, in fact, that if no deal gets done within the next 36-ish hours, the shutdown may go on longer than anyone in Washington expects. And this was written on on Sunday. Here's why, and it's mostly human nature. Think about that time, and this, I love when they do CNN. I'm giving y'all props because normally I don't push CNN stories, but this one I'm making an exception. Think about the time in your teen years when you went with your friends out to the abandoned quarry that had been filled in with water. Okay, maybe just me, but stick with me. It was against the law to jump off the cliffs and into the water. You could hit a piece of the old equipment they dumped down into the hole and die. So my mom told me. The first time you jumped, you did it only after negotiating with yourself for a while, trying to calculate your actual chances of getting arrested or dying versus the shame you would incur among your friends if you didn't jump. But once you jumped that first time, it got much easier the next time and easier the time after that. My point is this. There was a huge push to keep the government open all the way up until midnight Friday. The images from the Senate on Friday night were remarkable. Senators huddled cheek to jowl in hopes of getting something done. But once they all jumped into a shutdown, the urgency on Saturday seemed to leach away with every passing hour. And by 7 p.m. Saturday, it was clear that nothing was happening. The Senate adjourned just after 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. A source close to the process told CNN's Jim Acosta that the proposed 3-week continuing resolution was dead in the water and that there was no next plan waiting in the wings. Illinois Democratic Rep. Raja Krishnamurthy acknowledged to CNN's Tal Kopan that concern is growing that the shutdown could go longer than initially expected. I think there's that anxiety, he told Kopan, adding, with each passing day, I think they grow more concerned that folks who are hurt by this shutdown are going to say a pox on everyone's houses. And so we all have to make the government work. Concerns about being blamed by voters could well be the push that both sides need to end the stalemate. The longer a shutdown goes on, the bigger the stakes. All politicians are motivated by their own instincts towards self-preservation. If either the Republican or Democratic rank and file panics, it becomes very hard for the leadership to continue to hold out for their wishes to end the shutdown. All of which is to say that, yes, the most likely scenario remains a relatively brief government shutdown. But remember that the 2003 shutdown lasted more than 2 weeks, and there's at least a chance that this shutdown follows that same blueprint. First and foremost, from a political and a blunt standpoint, whether this goes on or whether it prolongs or doesn't happen or how it all turns out, everything still has to keep going in motion. The one thing that a lot of people are worried and concerned of the most, and this is not even something that's crossed my mind, but it's something that people are like having a worry with, and that is what's going to happen with my taxes. How will the IRS be impacted by this? What, like, there are those intangibles that some people are really worried about, when in reality you have, by having the government shut down, a lot of folks are looking at, will I be working, or how long will I have to go through the process of working? And as someone mentioned, and as I've been informed and had to be kind of broken down on, this isn't the first time we've gone through this. And as the story states, we went through it. And even with it happening, I mean, it happened for that period of time. But once it was done, the smoke clears and we moving on. I don't know the certainty or the extent of where this can go, but it's just an ironic situation that it literally happened a year into Trump's term since his inauguration, a year since he was inaugurated. And that was something that was brought up too, which I thought was funny. I feel it'll last a couple of weeks, but as with anything, the storm shall pass. But I'm also going to say something else, and this is going to kind of be a random spinoff, but it'll put things into a lighter perspective. While this is all going on, we've all completely turned our backs and forgotten all about what happened in reference to net neutrality. That came and went. And there was huge concern and huge worry about what was going to be the end result from that. And the internet's still kind of going business as usual. So I'm intrigued to see what will happen, but I don't feel like there's going to be as much going on with it as they've put out there regarding that. Now we'll get into our artist spotlight, which I've been doing pretty good with getting these going, but it's been like an off and on thing. So now we'll, push it and let it happen. She was initially going to be the artist spotlight last week, but I made a change like last second where I was like, oh, well, I mean, since it was her birthday, I'll do Sade. But this week's artist spotlight is none other than Adele Laurie Blue Atkins, or Adele. She was born on May 5th, 1988 in northern London, England. She was the only child of Penny Atkins, who was just 18 at the time she had her. And her father was Mark Evans, who left when Adele was 4. Mark has remained in contact with Adele up until her teen years. Had remained in contact with her up until her teen years, and then he had issues with alcohol and increasing estrangement from his daughter, which caused their relationship to burn. I know deteriorates there, but you burn a bridge. Adele, by default and by nature, she grew close to her mom, who encouraged her young daughter to explore and not to stick to one thing. Adele had developed a passion for music early. She had gravitated towards Lauryn Hill, Mary J., and Destiny's Child. Her eye-opening moment came when she was 15 and she happened to come across some records from Etta James and Ella Fitzgerald. There was no true heritage in their family, Adele stated back in an interview in 2008 with The Telegraph. Chart music was all she knew. So when she listened to the Ettas and the Ellas, it sounded so cheesy, but it was like an awakening. She stated that, oh right, some people have proper longevity and are legends. She was also inspired that a 15-year-old was listening. She was inspired that as a 15-year-old, she was listening to music that had been made in the 40s. Despite being bright, she wasn't oriented towards traditional classroom settings. Instead, her mother enrolled her in the Brit School of Performing Arts and Technology, which counts Amy Winehouse as an alum. While at school, Adele did a 3-track demo for a class project that was posted on her MySpace page. Wow, taking it back. Executives at XL Recordings heard the tracks, and they contacted her in November 2006, 4 months after she had graduated school. She was signed to a record deal. Her first album was called 19, which was named after her age when she began recording the project. It went on sale in early 2008. It was led by two hit singles, "Hometown Glory" and "Chasing Pavements." It then rocketed her to fame. It was released in the U.S. through Columbia Records. It resonated with American audiences. Much of it had just as much as it did with British music fans. She centered her commercial success with an appearance in October 2008 on Saturday on SNL. At the taping, the album was ranked number 40 on iTunes. Less than 24 hours later, it was ranked number 1. It's crazy. iTunes has been out that long. In the 2009 Grammy Awards, she took home her Best New Artist. She took home the award for Best New Artist. In addition, she earned the album then earned her the distinction of being named the Sound of 2008 by the BBC. That same year, she earned Critics' Choice Prize at the Brit Awards. Her follow-up then was 21. It was named again for her age. It was released in early 2011. It tapped into her appreciation for classic R&B and jazz, and the record was a monster hit, selling 352,000 copies in its first week. Its main song that a lot of people know is "Rolling in Deep." It also had the tracks "Someone Like You." In February 2011, she found herself with 2 top 5 singles and a pair of top 5 albums in the same week, becoming the only artist besides the Beatles and 50 Cent to achieve that milestone. It stayed number 1 for 11 weeks. She broke the solo female artist that was previously held by Madonna's Immaculate Collection. It then went on to sell 30 million copies worldwide. 2012, she swept the Grammy Awards, taking home 6 wins, including Album of the Year. She did in 2013. She won her 7th Grammy for her hit single "Set Fire to the Rain." That same year, the single won a Golden Globe and an Academy Award for "Skyfall," which was the theme song for the 2013 James Bond film. Coupled with success was her maturity and ability to avoid the fame-induced pitfalls that plagued Winehouse. Adele had a larger, curvier body. She had to, she went against the trend of the top 40 female celebs. She was also confident in not only just her talent but her looks. I've seen people where it rules their lives, who want to be thinner or have bigger boobs, and how it wears them down. She told Vogue magazine in 2011. And I just don't want that in my life. She went on in 2015 to make the album 25, which was her 3rd album and her first full-length studio project in several years. Her last record was a breakup record, and she was labeling the 25 album, it would be a makeup record, making up for lost time, making up for everything she had ever did and never did. It was about getting to know who she had become without ever realizing. She was apologetic in saying that it took so long, but as with anything, life happens. The following day, she released her ballad "Hello," which everyone knows. It was an epic track. It accompanied a visual clip which featured Tristan Wilds, the romantic interest, and it was directed by up-and-coming filmmaker Xavier Dolan, and was the first music video to be shot with IMAX cameras. It released in November of 25, released in November of 2015. Had a collection of emotional, sometimes plaintive songs, looking at the ins and outs of relationship, owing much of its sound to traditional pop craft. The album was an international smash hit, which reached number 1 on iTunes in 110 countries, And in the U.S., 25 had sold 3.38 million copies in 7 days, which had beat NSYNC's record of 2.42 sold in a week. Adele's second single off of the album was When We Were Young, which was a meditation on looking back and growing older. Then in 26, she performed All I Ask, which was co-written with Bruno Mars at the 58th Annual Grammy Awards. In 2017, she returned to the Grammy stage and had to stop. Her tribute to the late George Michael to do a slow down version of Fast Love, which was one of his hit singles, and start over saying that she was sorry, she didn't want to mess it up. She then went on to sing the song to a standing ovation and then swept the awards with 5 wins for her work on 25. In her acceptance speech for album of the year, she acknowledged the nominee Beyonce and her groundbreaking album Lemonade. My artist of my life is Beyonce, and this album, for me, the Lemonade album, was just so monumental, she said. It was well thought out and also beautiful and soul-bearing. And we all got to see another side to Beyonce that we normally don't see. And we all appreciated it. She was their light. She was the way, and made Adele and many of her friends feel, the way you make many black friends feel is empowering, and you make them stand for themselves. And she gave Beyonce her credit for Lemonade, in spite of how it all went down. On June 29th, 2012, Adele announced on her website that she was pregnant with her first child. The baby's father was Adele's boyfriend, Simon Konecki. Everyone asked Adele about how she felt as a mother. She really wanted to be a mom. She better start getting on with it, she said, adding that she wants to have a trio of boys by the time she's 30. She gave birth to her son Angelo on October 9th, 2012. If there's anyone who internationally built a resume when it came to music, or when it comes to music, it would be Adele. I've been off and on with listening to Adele, and I'll admit that. But I can come clean in saying now that I understand. I've always understood her anyway, but I understand a lot more where Adele was singing from, or how she felt in her approach when it came to singing. As I've gone over it, album of the year, climbing the charts, climbing the Billboard charts, to some artists, you'd be surprised, it's like a huge thing, and we don't see it talked about as often. But in this case, it was definitely going to be addressed, and with her being, she literally had the best of both worlds, because she had her UK fans, which were already in tuned and invested, and then she had the United States, who loved her even more. So it's just something that goes unnoticed, but I feel like we shouldn't take it lightly as to what Adele has and could possibly do for music. So if you have or have not listened to any of Adele's music, definitely give it a listen or give it a go. All right. As of the week time. So I'm kind of upset because I found an article, but I really don't like how this article discussed this whole story. So I'm going to kind of paraphrase my observation. Basically, Chris Paul was playing his first game back in LA. It was his first game playing against the Clippers, or coming back to LA to play. He had been with the Clippers for 6 years, and I found a better version of the article. So I'll make as the story, because the first one just sucks. Before I continue the story, and I guess it's just how sports is, the Bucks became impatient. Even though they're an eighth seed in the East, they did decide to fire Jason Kidd. We'll have that story, and I'll get to the root of that more in depth next week, because I feel like there's an underlying story behind him being fired, and whoever they bring in as a replacement, we can chop it up about that as well. After 6 seasons in Los Angeles, Chris Paul made damn sure that his return was memorable. All the usual homecoming moments were present early on, some cheers, some boos, a video tribute, but that quickly gave way to absurdity with 3 minutes and 42 seconds left in the game. Excuse me. Wesley Johnson had goaltended on. Eric Gordon went up for a layup. Wesley Johnson goaltended. They didn't call it. Griffin was given a generous continuation call when over Chris Paul on the next play. A couple minutes later, Griffin spiked the ball off Gordon's back while he was falling out of bounds. And then there was a skirmish, as we all like to call it, between Trevor Ariza and Blake Griffin, which caused them to be ejected with technical fouls. Then Mike D'Antonio was mad Griffin had ran into him. Austin Rivers, being Austin Rivers, was talking a lot of smack, but he didn't play that game. He was in street clothes, so that was weird. That then sums it up. And then there was a breakdown of whether there was a fight that happened. So I'm not gonna give this part of the story a lot of attention, because I'm gonna make a mockery as TNT did. And this is why this has become an ass of the week. There have been a lot of skirmishes. There have been a lot of scuffles. There have been a lot of little tiffs between players at games. As much as I've watched basketball, because I can't say I watched it all 35 years, I've watched at least 25 years of basketball. At no point have I ever heard them say the game became so crucial or became so critical where police had to escort the players to their buses to make sure that they were safe. Okay. And I'm gonna use a weird reference, but I'm gonna make my point with doing so. When Kevin Garnett and Carmelo Anthony had their Cheerios beef, if you want to go back and look up that story, you're welcome to do so. I believe I talked about it on the podcast. Don't remember the podcast number because I'm improv this one. When they had their little squad or their little tiff back then, even with them meeting after the game and even with them talking smack within the game, it never got to the point where police had to be called. Shaq threw a basketball off of Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley threw a ball at Shaq or whatever. There was no security needed or police involved. The fact that, and this was, I'm gonna see, they may have it in this article. They do, that would be great. They do. Okay, here we go. Because I'm gonna talk about it. This part of the story is why this is ass of the week. Number one, police were called, and Inside the NBA reacted. There has never been a news story created for Inside the NBA quickly like this one. Look briefly. Imagine how you think Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley might react to a story like this one. Yes, you're right. What's in your head right now is spot on. So I'm going to unmute this because normally I will have stuff where you don't hear it. But I want y'all to hear what this is stating. And if they say this during this interview, it's going to be even better. If it works.
They're not laughing at you. They're laughing at the inside. They don't believe that guys. I played in the NBA for 16 years, and I've been on TV for 18 years. This is the first time I ever heard police presence. They got wait. They got a police presence? Are you kidding me? Wait, come on, man.
Numerous social media reports that LAPD was called.
LAPD We had to break, Jeremy. Let's take a look at 10-4. Let's take a look at these shoes.
Okay. So a couple things. They didn't. The part that's tough about it because they didn't show it during that section. They didn't show the actual. They didn't show the actual interview because when she was talking, the analyst who was at the game or the story, one of the reporters, as she started talking, they already were laughing because they're looking at it as, y'all are grown men. What are you calling the police for? And what are they supposed to come and do? Like we need a police presence due to what happened. They add another part stating that the Rockets had used a secret passage. They say, sure, factual reporting revealed that there was nothing secret about the tunnel that connected the two locker rooms underneath Staples Center, but Twitter quickly latched on to a secret tunnel joke that didn't let up. Rockets players were clamoring for Blake Griffin too, league sources said. Chris Paul also entered with other Rockets players through a back door that connects team dressing rooms. The mental image of Paul, a Clipper for 6 seasons, knowing a secret entrance to his old team's locker room and then leading his new team on an excursion through said entrance to confront his former coach, son, for talking shit, is just too beautiful to pass up. The thing about this that makes it so random is there were players who were involved that were part of this and did what they did, but even worse, no one actually fought. It just kind of was like, we're going to go over here like we're about to do something. And then, in hindsight, to what makes it even more of a unique ass of the week is a couple of days later, Trevor Ariza called Austin Rivers. They talked it out and hashed everything out, and everything's good. And Austin Rivers came clean and saying, "Hey, I'm glad we talked it out and everything's fine." You got to play these two teams. Will play again soon, and even more intriguing behind them playing again soon is Austin Rivers going to be playing that game? How will that game go? So we'll look forward to that story, and if it comes up again, then we'll definitely have our minds and our souls set on that. The next story, it almost did not make being an ass of the week, but it had to become an ass of the week for how stupid but realistic I could see this being done. And that is the cops in Philadelphia decided to put Crisco oil. I'm saying oil, but they put Crisco on the poles and the posts in Philadelphia before the Eagles and the Vikings played. So I'm going to read this to have a little bit of fun with this whole process. City crews dubbing themselves the Crisco Cops were greasing light poles around Philadelphia Sunday to prevent Eagles fans from climbing after the NFC Championship game. The Eagles and Minnesota Vikings kick off at 5:40 Central Time on Fox. A trip to the Super Bowl is at stake, meaning one city, or two cities in Minnesota's case, will erupt in excitement Sunday night. For the Vikings, an NFC championship would be a historic feat. Minnesota is hosting Super Bowl 52, and no NFL team has ever played a Super Bowl in its home stadium. That was kind of ironic why they wanted to have Minnesota on that picture too. The Vikings have never won a Super Bowl, but played in 4 of them. And they show you which years, so I'm not going to do Roman numerals. The Eagles have appeared in the Super Bowl twice. They have theirs listed, but have never won the Lombardi Trophy. Philadelphia's last Super Bowl trip was 2004 against New England Patriots, who they're playing again. But prior to that game, the Eagles appeared in and lost 3 consecutive NFC Championship games. The Vikings arrived in Philadelphia on Saturday and were greeted by fans with a Skol chant outside of the hotel. One fan who didn't make the trip is 99-year-old Mike Wall, a special guest and good luck charm for the Vikings' last second win over the New Orleans Saints in the divisional round. But Millie will be watching from home with her screwdriver and foam brick in hand. So, I have reading the full article didn't need to be read, but I don't know who to make more ass of the week for this one. Whether it would be the cops putting the Crisco oil on the poles, or the fact that fans probably still try to jump on poles despite the Crisco oil being placed on them. And I mean, what makes it so funny, even worse, is when you look at this picture of the police officer. And I'm sitting here like this guy, but I'm like, wait, he's a police officer. A cop holding a bucket of Crisco and just going to town, putting this on there. Do you get a paint roller, like as far as like rolling the top of it to make sure it doesn't happen? Are you only doing the bottom? Like, these are questions that I feel need to be addressed. Did fans think steps ahead and realize like, oh, they're gonna do it, let's clean it off? Like, come on, Philly. And it just happened to be even more ironic that Philadelphia won the game. So I didn't hear any stories, and it wasn't much addressed regarding the Crisco madness, but obviously it happened. The final and my favorite, because I forgot this story, but I realized it after Jacksonville lost. First and foremost, before I even read this story, I want to share something that I feel needs to be shared and addressed. Never prematurely celebrate a championship or a moment. My twin and I, my roommate, we talked about this, and we stand behind it, and I'm standing behind it until the end. I am a true Carolina Panthers fan. Not gonna deny it, not gonna front on it. A couple of years ago, Carolina played Denver. The last thing you were gonna hear me say is Brian's getting a Carolina tattoo for the Super Bowl. The dumbest thing to happen. The clock had better be reading 0, and they better be holding that Lombardi trophy, and the following day I'll go get the tattoo. Well, we're pushing back a little bit, but back on January the 18th, a Jaguars fan decided to get a Super Bowl 52 championship tattoo before the championship game. One, it's a horrible tattoo. If you do have the link and you're able to look at it, go check it out. You'll be very disappointed in what you see. The tattoo says Saxonville Jaguars, Super Bowl 52 champions. And the line, the Roman numerals look like a L, I, and look like a backwards L. They go into the story in stating that one excited Jacksonville Jaguars fan could not wait 3 weeks to celebrate a title that may not happen. As shared by News for Jacks on Twitter, Kelly Allen branded his body with a tattoo commemorating them as Super Bowl 52 champions. He even referred to them by their Saxonville moniker, which adds even more risk since that nickname could grow obsolete in a few years. Allen, of course, is getting ahead of himself. The Jaguars must first defeat the New England Patriots at Gillette Stadium this Sunday, which they didn't. According to OddsShark, Tom Brady's team is favored to win by 8 points. The Jaguars would need to defeat the Philadelphia Eagles or Minnesota Vikings, who respectively ended this season number 1 and number 2 in rushing defense. If the Vikings win the NFC Championship game, they will become the first team in NFL history to play the Super Bowl in their own stadium. There's a strong possibility that this fan will regret the premature tattoo. It seems like something Jason Mendoza would have done before going to the good place. You don't do things prematurely. That is what I'm going to start with, first and foremost. I have no issue and no conflict with you being supportive and proud of your team achieving great things. let's get that on the table first and foremost. The team is, succeeded and fulfilled a journey that no one expected. I'm all for that. I'm here for that. What I'm not here for is you getting too far ahead of yourself in something that has not happened yet. If they had at least beat New England, then I would have been okay with this. But what makes the New England game even more ironic, and us talking about it earlier, is Jacksonville could have won the game. So the tattooed run could have still been on. But they lost. And now you got to either keep that tattoo, which looked like a piece of crap, or get it removed or get some type of covering, do something. If I were you, I would get a tattoo covering. That's just my opinion. I just didn't even, because what makes this a funny story is I initially thought about it but didn't have it as a thought. But then I was like, wait, we normally do two, 1 or 2 ads of the week, but I'm like, this one has to go up because it was just the most premature excitement that I've seen, period. So, sir, you definitely are a lock for ass of the week. Let me make sure I give him his proper credit. Kelly Allen, definitely your ass of the week. You did a great job. Don't let it happen again. Don't start next season getting a tattoo. And I could almost give this to, it's not Martavius Bryant, the cornerback for the cornerback for Jacksonville also was premature because he was talking about they were going to the Super Bowl. So don't get too far ahead of yourself. Like, if you're gonna plan out and you want to project positive or good things, I'm all for it. I'm here for that. I'm always here for projecting good things. But win. Actually win first, and then I'll give you your props. I am glad that the shows are coming together. There's more in store. Next week will be kind of I ain't gonna say a down week because it'll be like stories kind of happen as they do. I will be kind of pushing a little bit of soccer next week since we are getting to that strong point with teams trying to pick up players on loan. So I'll be getting into that a little bit. Basketball season is still full force, and next week we can talk about, we'll get into the rosters as far as who the reserves are, which they'll address today, and then a couple of days from now, who was chosen for what team. And we'll be looking forward to if Tom Brady's going to play in the Super Bowl, because they're going to talk about his quote-unquote injury. If anything, he's injured from not getting a call from the referees, but that's my shade for the day. As always, the past is signing out. If you want to go to any social media, I'm working harder on doing social media a little bit more intense. Past Podcasts, PASS Podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. I'm having more fun. If you are following on Snapchat, I literally post more non-podcast related stuff just to kind of get attention from time to time and have a little bit of fun. So tune in, and if you're not already subscribed or you're not viewing it, definitely check me out on iTunes. I also do post the podcast on pastpodcast.com. Long ending, don't care. It's my show. I do what I want. But y'all be good. Stay safe. Take it easy. The Past signing out. Peace.